This episode of the Wise Guy Radio Show is brought to you by Mountain Glass Arts. For the month of February, Mountain Glass is offering shot, tube, and rod at 40% off. Just put in the code SHOT, that is SCHOTT at checkout. And for all you soft glass nerds, they are offering their COE 104 sale, Creation is Messy, 30% off. Just put in the code MESSY, that is MESSY at checkout. And for any other questions and all your glass needs, just go to mountainglass.com. That is mountainglass.com. This is the Wise Guy Radio Show, a podcast dedicated to educating and inspiring through conversations with today's top talents in the world of glass. We will be dissecting their journeys in hopes to deliver actionable content that you, the artist, can start implementing now, helping you grow not only as a creative spirit, but also a successful artistic entrepreneur. With a little organization, relationship building, and your artistic ability, you can obtain greatness. Climb aboard, whether an artist, retail owner, or enthusiast. We have a ton of fun in store for you. Welcome to the Wise Guy Radio Show.
You're listening to the Wise Guy Radio Show.
Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the Wise Guy Radio Show, episode number 86. This is Jay Michael, your host. Thank you so much for tuning in today. With 17 years of experience behind the torch, I am as excited as always to bring you conversations with artists, sharing their stories in hopes to inspire and entertain while helping you grow your business. It's an honor to do this show on a weekly basis. Thank you so much again for tuning in. Today is a special episode featuring Micah Evans. Micah has graced us with his presence by taking some time out of his busy schedule to come on and share his story with you guys. His background, where he came from, where he started, his time at Penland, all kind of stuff. We had a pretty fun conversation. I actually just got off the phone with him, so I'm a little bit pumped up right now, if you can't tell. It's pretty cool. He not only has been doing glass since '99, like myself, which is awesome, but he has been very instrumental in the industry of functional art and the pipe itself, and his passion shines through in this episode about how happy and how much he loves the pipe and the function of it and the ceremonial aspect of it. I hope you guys enjoy. Again, this interview with Micah was phenomenal. It's a little bit over 2 hours long, and I am worn the hell out. So I'm going to let you all go before I start rambling. But in the meantime, please share this with your friends and family. Those of you out there who are glass artists that want to share what it is that you do, definitely share the show with them. If you're just a collector or a person who appreciates glass in general, share this with your other friends who are collectors and appreciate this as well if they haven't heard it. And then also, please don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes. If you have a Droid and you listen to it on the Droid systems, you can go to Stitcher and listen to it there as well. And then also go to wiseguyradio.com. And at the bottom of the page there, you can subscribe. The website has not been updated for several months, but it is up and active. And I am now finally have got everything taken care of on my end to get this new website up and going, which I'm pumped about. It's going to be time-consuming, but it is worth it all. So that being said, I'm getting the hell out of here. You all enjoy this episode with Micah Evans. And again, I love you all so much. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you to Green Flash Glass and Mountain Glass for being on board as our main sponsors. Definitely go to check those guys out. Their links are in the show notes. And if you have any questions or comments, you can hit the comment link in the show notes as well. And just send me an email and let me know what's up. Other than that, you all take it easy. Happy melting. And we will talk to you on the next episode of the Wise Guy Radio Show. Take it easy. Peace. What's going on, Micah? How you doing, brother?
Good, man. So excited to be on this, and I'm honored. Thank you so much.
Hey, man, the honor is all mine too, brother. So, I know you're busy and getting back into Texas now, getting settled in, getting some new studio space going with all the boys at St. Elmo's. So, sounds like a lot of fun, and you got a huge crew of awesome artists and influential guys there. So it's definitely hats off to you for being a part of that and influencing.
I got
all
lucky. Yeah. Yeah. Well, while I was gone at Penland for 3 years, they built this crazy awesome studio, and I was lucky enough to move back in and have them have everything set up for me pretty much. So I lucked out big time. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So before we get too far off track, if you want to go ahead and get us started by giving us a little bit of your background, art background for schooling and what have you, and then what got you into the glass and who introduced you to it.
Sure. Let's see. I grew up in Washington State, and in a rural town in central Washington. And as far as the early art education, I was in an agricultural town, so we had like one art class, and um, I'd always kind of done art on my own. In the long run, I ended up leaving that little town to move to Seattle, and I enrolled in the Art Institute of Seattle, which is kind of a trade school for artists. I never was a great student, so I couldn't really get into a real college, is what a quote unquote real college. Um, but I was going. This was the late '90s, so '96 or so. So I was going to be a computer animator, man. I wanted to make video games.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah.
I thought I did. Back then, it was a little different. Like trying to get what's in your head onto the computer was a bit more closer to programming than anything artistic, as far as I felt. So I really didn't last too long. I think I made it about a year and a half in that program before I ended up just kind of dropping out. And then kind of stumbled into a glass studio, which my roommate at the time was a glass blower. And a flame worker, pipe maker, and he worked at a studio in Stoneway Glass in kind of the Fremont area of Seattle, and I just hung out at that studio until I got an opportunity to jump on the torch. So it's funny, I don't really have a ton of education, which has been interesting my whole career, because I put myself into positions that normally you'd kind of need a degree to get to. I always like to say I kind of snuck around the back door and climbed in the window to a lot of these opportunities. But yeah, I got the 1 year I did spend at the Art Institute of Seattle. I got a really good foundation in kind of just basic design principles and color theory and kind of your core art education, quote unquote.
Yeah, it's good
more
foundation.
of kind of from like an illustration or like more of a let's see, I don't know what you'd really call it. I guess more of a practical art education, not much in the conceptual world,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that was kind of the extent of my official art education. No degree, but a little bit of good information and a couple of really great instructors, which really helps.
Yeah,
and then the rest was. Yeah, and then how glass goes, flame working. That's when the internet was just getting off the ground. I mean, it was there, but there wasn't a lot of content. Nobody had really, early adopters of the internet weren't flame workers and hadn't really put a ton of content online at that point. So, I took a couple of introductory classes basically, and from there you're kind of left on your own. So I hung out at hot shops a lot. And, the contemporary lampworking was your Bible. That was your YouTube back then.
Yeah.
So, you just kind of pick up what you can and then make it up as you go.
Do you find that hanging out in the hot shops really helped, I guess, influence like hand technique or certain parts of your creativity?
Yeah, it's funny. There's a lot of transfer. It did because the material, when it's hot, the material kind of moves in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
But when when boro is in the flame, the viscosity and kind of how it moves is very similar to hot glass. But as soon as you take it out of the flame, everything changes. So there was a bit of transfer. Yes, most definitely. And a lot of bad habits I picked up as well. Things that didn't cross over that you don't really know at that point. Yeah, it was, and back then the studios were more closed off too. Like people weren't as sharing. You weren't able to pick up as much from other people necessarily. So it was interesting time to be a flame worker. I think we were stagnant as far as like the rate of kind of progression back then was much slower.
Yeah, man, compared to nowadays, holy shit.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah,
right?
It's great now.
I mean, I think it took probably most of us like 10 years to really find our groove. Where now you got guys that's like 6 to 8 months, a year into it, they're like doing stuff I never even thought I was going to be doing in 10 years.
Yeah,
It's
well, I
amazing.
mean, it's a good and bad, and
Yeah, I
because
agree.
I think I ended up with a huge diverse skill set
Hmm.
compared to kind of I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm generalizing too much, but I think that people that get into it now are able to kind of concentrate much earlier on and maybe specialize in kind of one aspect of flame working, whereas I had to diversify so much to figure things out on my own and just to make a living, especially that too, that I ended up with a bit of my let's say my toolbox has a lot more tools in it than most flame workers
Yeah, I think it's the
do
difference between
nowadays.
like a glass artist and a pipe maker. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, no, it's funny. I think it's just flame working, especially for that time. Uh, I don't. There's that weird. There's a weird line that a lot of people put between glass artists and pipe makers, and
Hmm.
I have a hard time defining that line at all. I think especially after kind of what I've been going through in the last 3 years with at Penland and things like that line has pretty much disappeared altogether.
Yeah.
For me, I think it's just a yeah, it's cultural. It's like the difference between hip hop and classical music. It's like they're both music,
Yeah.
um, and yeah,
Well, do you
but
find it like early on? Because I know, like for me, it was the same. It was this way, but early on in your glass career, if you mentioned that you were a glass artist or a lamp worker or flame worker to someone that was a furnace worker, even did they immediately give you the stigma like, oh, you must make pipes? Like they didn't want to even discuss anything with you because they just assumed that you made pipes at the time.
um, yeah, well, yeah. So yeah, having that um, that line of pipe making. And back in the '90s in Seattle and Northwest, it wasn't exactly like it is now, but I'd say it was kind of similar. Like where it was almost pop culture then too. Like it was pretty popular. Like it wasn't necessarily looked down upon
Okay.
um, in the '90s in the Northwest. But when I moved to Florida, which was a couple years after I started, I moved to the Bible Belt to a place without a pipe culture or even a marijuana culture.
Hmm.
That line started to get more defined, right? Where people, whether it was the hot glass people or just people in general, were way more closed off to the pipe stuff, right?
Yeah, that's how I've always dealt
Um,
with here in Florida for sure.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, fuck
Yeah.
Florida. So back in the '90s in Florida, it was like, I mean, so much different. I mean, the shops in my neck of the woods would get raided by the DEA pretty much yearly,
Hmm.
and then the more Bible Belt, more conservative, so people didn't necessarily look at you um, in a good light at all. So there was a huge contrast between the Northwest and anywhere else in the country, pretty much back then, as far as how people looked at you as a pipe maker, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I think that defining line between the hot glass, let's say, and pipes wasn't necessarily between hot glass and pipes. That tension was between hot glass and flame working. There's always been a bit of a uh, you know uh, big brother little brother kind of resentment almost, or like, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
we're
Yeah, for
we're,
sure.
we're related, but your mom and dad are much easier on you, or like, it's like this. It's not like disrespectful, but they just definitely don't respect you. Like
Yeah, I
it's
know what
hard
you mean.
to
No,
it's hard.
totally. I agree. Yeah.
And that's disappearing right now, I think, because of this new generation of the hot glass,
Hmm.
of the hot shop, right? Because they've grown up with pipes as a pop culture thing, through high school. And so they're coming into their hot glass programs at universities, these kids now, with an understanding of what flame working is, um, a much broader understanding of what flame working is, right?
Yeah,
Um,
especially now too with a lot of the colleges offering more so than they used to glass classes.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, it's really great, because we're seeing a lot more people crossing over. Like there's like the Danny Whites of that world
Yeah.
that are extremely talented in the hot shop, and like the up and comers of the soft glass world are so excited about the flame workers and collaborating and dabbling and going back and forth, and that's never really happened across the board. And it's also a changing dynamic in the hot shop where there's a kind of a new, not new, but there's a more of a popularized sculpting techniques in the hot shop where they're working the glass colder and heating it with torches.
Yeah, exactly.
So even the hot shop techniques are leaning heavier on the torch. So they're basically flame working at the bench at a much larger scale with a different material, so that the skills, the hand skills, and the kind of the knowledge bases are aligning, just naturally, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's a cool dynamic to see the evolution of it all, kind of
Yeah,
like you're saying, like the crossover almost kind of thing going on. It's pretty neat.
yeah.
So to kind of back up a little bit, when you were still in Seattle, what were some of the first things that you were making?
It was all pipes. I
Was it?
mean, I learned. I mean, that was when I was. I think I started when I was 23, 24 years old. And um, I was going pro as a pot smoker. That was my lifestyle.
Right.
No, I could no longer compete in the Olympics. Like, I had made the transition to out of amateur and into the pros. So, which is great, because, like, that's the time where, like, that was fun. I had a bunch of roommates. I had lived with like 6 dudes in a house, and rent was cheap, and we just kind of played hacky sack, and like
Yeah. Hell yeah.
went to fish shows, and I learned how to blow glass, and it was a really fun time in my life. And the pipes fit right in with kind of the dynamic of my social life, right? And so it felt great. It was really fun. And like I said, it was like, people, it was a little bit of a subculture, pop culture thing back then. Like, it was kind of cool. It was really cool to be a pipe maker. Not a lot of people got to do it, and you felt kind of this rebellious outlaw type thing going on.
Yeah, for sure. Did you have a name for yourself back then, like a alias, or did you just always go by Mike?
Man, I never thought I was cool enough to have an alias, right? And so, like, I just was worried about the glass. And to tell you the truth, in that first year, you're just trying to learn so much.
Mhm.
Now you kind of pick your alias before you even fucking pick up a piece of glass, right?
Yeah,
And
totally.
back then, yeah, I could never think of one that stuck, right? And then it just never really. You just kind of went by Micah. And over the years, like, everybody had the weirdest names too. At a certain point, I started calling myself kind of jokey names to kind of make fun of some of the guys that had these just crazy ass hippie, aliases. For a while, I went as Goat Scroat, uh, and then it actually stuck for a second, and I was like, oh shit, now I'm fucking Goat Scroat. I gotta like change this, right? And so I think my earliest glasspipes.org, glass art, it was that, and then I changed to my initials at a certain point, which is just me,
Mhm.
me, which actually really resonated, just because it was just simple. It wasn't too far of a stretch away from my real name. I've always had a problem with, while it was necessary to create a distance between my name and the pipes sometimes, especially early on, in the Bible Belt stuff,
Mhm.
and I always felt like it was really kind of weird to not own what you're doing,
Yeah.
in a way that I wanted my name to be associated with it, kind of, but not at the same time. It's really
Mhm.
hard.
Yeah,
So
it's weird.
that was the perfect distance for me, or at least that my signature on it was not my full name, but it wasn't too far away from who I really was.
Hell yeah. So when you
Yeah.
guys so you were working with Lance up in Seattle?
Yeah. So yeah, Lance Sanford taught me how to blow glass, right?
Nice.
And it's funny, we look back on it, and a lot of us have this thing where we take an apprenticeship from the guy that's like really good at glass blowing. But back then in the 90s, we really, even the guys that were really, really good, didn't know a ton about flame working. And I'm sure that'll be the same way another 15 years from now. People look back at us and be like, man, we thought they were so good back then, but they didn't really know a whole lot.
Right.
And so that apprenticeship was, like 2 or 3 really introductory classes, right? But he gave me that window into flame working, and then taught me everything he knew, and he'd only been blowing glass for a year and a half or 2 years at that point. And we were working on single tip Victor welding torches,
Yeah.
And but it gave me a window into flame working, and then we we're making just mostly outside work, wrap and rake stuff, layered fume stuff, and then just dipped into inside out, and which was as soon as I got a torch that was bigger than a Victor,
Yeah.
Yeah, so Lance taught me the very beginning, and he ended up being a guy that I after a year and a half or so in Seattle, we decided to move to Florida away from that winter. He had some family in Jacksonville Beach, or Jacksonville, Florida, and to start a little studio in Florida. And I was all about it, and just it's about as far away as I could get from where I grew up, not just, geographically in the United States, but culturally too. I didn't realize it at the time, but once I moved down there, I realized that, oh my goodness, like this is way more Confederate than I thought it would be. And that was interesting.
Yeah.
For me.
What's interesting too for myself is I remember when you guys came to Florida, and I didn't put it together until I was going over your bio, the stuff you sent me, and I was like, holy shit, I totally remember when you guys came to Florida. And then I remember when you went to Georgia for a bit, and then you were kind of going all over the place. But I remember when you guys came to Florida, and I remember Lucid Visions. And then at what point did Josh come on board?
Josh was our best friend in Seattle,
okay.
Right? So Josh and I in Seattle, we went to college together, or the Art Institute together, and we both dropped out about the same time to go pro with the weed, and then he was always just like itching at the bit. He's super creative, right? Super creative guy, still is. He's just I think he's not blowing glass. I don't know if he's blowing glass at all, or as much, but still doing really creative stuff.
Yeah, his paintings
right?
are awesome.
Oh yeah, like phenomenal, and like work ethic is great. And but anyway, so he was always like, you could tell he was like, man, I really want to, if there's ever a way, And so when we decided to move to Florida, he was ready to get out of there too. And so he was like, he just got married, and it was him and his wife were like, let's get the fuck out of here, And so he was like, hey, if I not tag along, but if I'll move as well, and then if we kind of go 3 ways in on the studio, will you guys teach me how to blow glass? And we're like, yeah, that's perfect, right? Because at the time, Lance in Seattle, we were working at somebody else's studio. There wasn't really a way to bring somebody in at the time to teach them without a big to-do, or even let them touch the material. It was a bit of a closed-off spot, which is okay. I don't blame the owner of that studio. That's just the nature of how they ran that studio. It's totally fine. But when we realized we're going to be in control of our own destiny, we were like, oh, man, we'd love to teach our best friend how to, what we knew. And that's kind of how it went. So we all moved. We got a house a couple blocks from the beach in Jacksonville Beach. Started learning to surf, picked up some odd jobs, saved money for about a year, and we all went in on this little hole-in-the-wall studio. Again, still 2 blocks from the beach. And slowly but surely, we all just kind of pulled in, and we split the ventilation, split everything, and really didn't know what we were doing. We're like, I guess we're just starting a studio, and then we realized, oh, I think we're starting a business.
Yeah.
And then we're like, I guess we're running a business, and and so we kind of fell into this and learning everything as we went. Josh is learning glass blowing, and then all of us together are trying to figure out how to make a business work, without any sort of business experience at all.
Yeah.
And then maintain a friendship through all of that, which ended up, the old, business and friendship thing. People always recommend staying away from. We just kind of fell into a business after being friends. We really didn't decide to do it,
Yeah.
But what ended up happening, was that we are still all making pipes, but there wasn't a culture, right? And there wasn't really a whole lot of places to sell it. But what we did do is we nailed down one head shop on the beach. It was a surf shop, and we could supply their whole little head shop they had in the back of the surf shop from the top to the bottom, from the headies to the one hitters. and that we would all split up that thing. Well, that was basically our only outlet. And instead of competing against each other for the only money we had, we decided we should just all three create a production line and then split the money. So nobody's kind of left out, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's how the business got started. And that blossomed into, Operation Pipe Dreams happened about a year after we opened that studio, which was kind of when they really cracked down on the paraphernalia stuff under the guise of supporting terrorism, and then we didn't know what to do. So we were kind of like trying to figure out ways to make money that weren't pipes, and that's when Lucid Visions was really took off. We started making other stuff, like mostly little sculptural ornaments and things. And then a small business was born. It's funny how it happens.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember that point in time too. We were the same way. I had like six guys under my wing running a full studio production, and we got the phone call. The feds were in Florida, over in the west or the East Coast, hitting an import company, and we were in the middle of blowing a doobie down, and it was like, holy fuck, what are we gonna do now? And it was interesting after seeing Degenerate Art and really seeing nationwide. I mean, everybody that I've looked up to was all going through the same shit, and we were like,
oh yeah,
what the fuck are we gonna do now? And it's like we went even deeper underground, but we were making shot glasses and dildos and pendants and whatever we could make to frickin' make a living, But like you're saying, it forced us all to get out of the pipes and get into something different and learn how to sell work that wasn't pipes. That was easy to sell.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's so funny because like we never quit making pipes,
Yeah, same with
But
me.
I think what we did is we had to put a legitimate face in case somebody came a knocking.
Yep.
That we could be like, oh no, we make fucking dolphins and seahorses and mermaids, and we had a couple outlets for that, but realistically, like still 80% of our money came from the pipes,
Right.
And it's so funny when looking back on it too, is like I really think that why I started making the art stuff to begin with was so I had something to show my parents, because I never told them I was a pipe maker till like 10 years in. There's a whole nother like background to that. There was, growing up with a conservative family, and they never like were helping me out with money or anything, or there was never any reason really not to tell them except to just like make Thanksgiving a little less awkward. So I was just like never really told them what I was making. So
yeah, I agree.
And then I realized that art stuff was I'd always been, I guess, had that desire to just create things for myself on the side. Like I've always done that ever since I was a kid. And that kind of continued. As soon as I started blowing glass, it just started to be out of glass instead of in my sketchbook or instead of a painting or drawing,
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd always had these side projects from on the side. And then eventually kind of those developed some momentum, those started to get noticed. And so I just kind of fell into the art stuff as well. And a lot of that really had to do with our early adoption of the internet. And that's one thing that people don't really see, is that what OPD did drove us underground, and that kind of went hand in hand with the acceleration of the content on the internet with glasspipes.org and glassartist.org, and the ability for us to network nationally in this underground scene through these websites.
Yeah.
And basically the MySpace or Facebook of flameworking back then was this little unknown.org websites that and then the kind of the melting pot or Blackboard back then,
Yeah.
So our early adoption of that stuff let us connect with our collecting community way before what we see now. A lot of other art forms kind of starting to tap into that, where we're old. We've been doing that for a while.
Yeah, we're seasoned.
Oh yeah, and so our little subculture is a subculture economy of like connecting directly with the collector.
Yeah.
It has everything to do with that government crackdown and kind of how everything developed.
Yes, it's neat.
Yeah. But I mean, a huge person in my career at that point, and this was in Florida and at Lucid Visions, was Nate Myers moved to St. Augustine and ended up at one point like he started a little garage studio at his buddy or roommates. He had a garage studio at the house he was living, and he went on vacation and came back, and somebody had broken in and stolen basically his whole studio.
Holy shit.
And so we had just kind of met a couple of months earlier, and he called me up and told me that, and I was like, "You gotta be fucking kidding me!" And Nate had come in when he first moved there to our studio, and just shown us every trick in his book, like for free. Just, this is how you do everything I know how to do. And he knew all kinds of stuff we didn't know. So it was the first person coming from a kind of a closed studio situation in the 90s that blew that out of the water and was just like, here you go. It's just open. Let's share. Let's do this, you know? And he was way more internet savvy than all of us. And he introduced me to glass pipes and glass artists and like all that stuff. So
Hell yeah. Hey, dude, I hate to cut you off. Can you give me 1 second? My dogs are sharing a crate right now. Oh shit. And my 8-month-old, I just walked in there and she has completely ripped her bed apart.
Oh no. Yeah, go for it, man.
Give me 1 sec.
You got it.
All right. I thought I heard some noise in there. I'm like, I wonder what the hell is going on. Usually it's really good, but she's almost a year, so she's like still puppy, but still wants to gets bored and then starts tearing shit up. It's annoying. And then she likes to eat the stuff too, which is not good. One of these days it's going to cost us a lot of money for blocked intestines or some shit, you know?
Right. Yeah, totally.
Jesus. All right. So anyway, yeah, man. So that's awesome with Nate because you know, he's definitely just in the community in general. He's definitely a big influence for a lot of folks, and you know the tools he's making, and you know all the other fun stuff nowadays. So I had no idea he was here. He's not here anymore though, right? He's moved.
No, he is one of the founding members of the Everdream Studio in Colorado.
That's what I thought.
With Joe Peters and WJC and Eugene and well, he was only there for a couple of years, you know, and then he moved back out to the Northwest and kind of took off from there. But he was a huge influence and gave me a ton of information and skill set back then. It was really great. Yeah.
Hell yeah. So at what point in time did you decide to get up and head to Miami?
When I left that business, basically when Lucid Visions kind of not necessarily broke up because they kept going, but that we hit a point where it wasn't sustaining 3 people in that, but it would probably sustain 2, right? Mm-hmm. And it was also to a point where we needed to make, you know, pipes to survive, and that, you know, they were, again, just the nature of where we were in the time in the political nature of the country. Like they were really wanting to not make as much pipes, right?
Yep.
And so there was a bit of a me going like, you know, we have to do this to pay the bills, and them going, we don't want to do this anymore. And so there was a point where that business and friendship thing hit a wall, and something had to change, and basically I had to leave, you know.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily an easy decision, and it wasn't necessarily my decision, you know. It was a good learning experience in hindsight and looking back, and now wasn't necessarily a good thing at the time. It created a lot of tension, but now, you know, everything's water on the bridge and new perspective on that. And it was one of the major pivotal points in my career, and probably one of the best things that could happen. So I kind of left Lucid Visions you know, like just crushed. I kind of been kicked out of this studio that I built, helped build, right? And then my girlfriend at the time got an opportunity to move to Miami, and so I just kind of tagged along with her, like this kind of broken little fucking puppy dog, like didn't know what I was gonna do. Had no studio and just moved to Miami. Had no studio or any way to do anything. There were no freaking glass blowers down there that I knew of. So anyway, yeah, I moved down there, and she had an opportunity at the University of Miami, and which transitioned into her assisting the glass professor at his private studio.
Oh wow.
Which turned into me helping him out part-time too, and then me helping him out full-time as well with her. So I kind of took a couple years off flame working in a way, and was the casting assistant to a glass caster who was also the professor at the university.
Man, you must learn a lot of stuff too doing that.
Well, it's funny. I learned a lot of stuff, but I also learned I didn't know shit about glass or art.
Right, exactly, absolutely.
And so what ended up happening was yeah, I and I learned a whole new way to approach my work, or a way I saw the way kind of established and successful artists approach their work. So I learned a lot about casting, and mold making and cold working. And then I got hooked up and did work with a ceramics professor, and then also was working with the sculpture. So I was able to see all kinds of craftsmen in other mediums at like a really high skill level, and also a really high conceptual artistic level work. So at the time, I'm still in the middle of this fucking funk where like I just got kicked out. I'm just trying to keep my head above water. I can't blow glass. I'm depressed about that. I'm just trying to pay the bills. I'm taking odd jobs. And at a certain point, I realized like this is actually probably one of the best learning opportunities I have.
Yeah.
And the professor that I was working for was actually the chair of the art department, and one of the he was kind of known as the guy in glass at the time, as far as the university goes, that created really great programs and put out amazing grad students, and like that were kind of the top of the young emerging artists at the time. And so he was really good at helping people develop, right? And so what I got was this little mini, maybe kind of grad schooly experience if I paid attention to what was going on. And I did. And that really helped out as far as how my personal work developed, and eventually how my pipes developed. Yeah, so it was really a huge deal, taking a couple years off flame working, being crushed, understanding I didn't know shit, and then kind of re-emerging out of that cocoon, and after Miami, moving to Austin to kind of use all that information and push on the gas again.
Yeah, and Austin's definitely a creative community. I've never been there myself, but just from South by Southwest and everything else that goes on there, I'm familiar with the dichotomy of the town. It's like just such a cool place.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting. I've always heard good things about the place. Never really been here. And at a certain point in Miami, I just had to leave. Nothing was going right for me there. Not that nothing was going right, but it just cost so much to live, barely keep my head above water. There's no real glass culture. I was like, wait a minute, I had become single again, and was like, oh shit, I don't have to be here. Like I can go anywhere, I'm a flame worker too. Like all my shit packs up into boxes, right? And so I did. I kind of got rid of everything I owned. Everything I owned pretty much fit into like 6 20 by 20 boxes, and I just found a apartment in Austin I could take over the lease on for 6 months. Shipped everything there, and I had one contact that hooked me up with a studio where I could work, and I was like, well, shit, here we go, and drove my little frickin' Mazda Miata to Austin, Texas, and started just immediately fell in love with the city and the creative community. And it reminded me of Seattle in the 90s, where the music was amazing. There was a bit of an edge to the city. It was this weird mix of like a red state and the state capital. So you had this conservative government and one of the biggest universities in the country. So you had this super liberal student body. So there's this weird, mixture of like, it's like brackish water, there's like salt water and fresh water, and it's like mixing, and it's like doing crazy shit all the time. And it's really cool.
Yeah.
And it's just growing now exponentially, which is the locals are having a hard time with, but I understand that that's kind of how it happens when something becomes attractive and cool. Other people want to be involved, and I was one of those people. But I think in a place like this, as long as you add to the culture, as long as you add to the personality of a city, even if it's growing, and you don't just suck it out, then it's going to remain a creative and positive place. So I'm trying to give back as much as possible while I'm here.
Yeah. That's killer.
And, yeah.
So at what point in time did, who, in a sense, introduced you to Luken?
So yeah, let's see. There's a huge flameworking community in Austin. And eventually I just kept hearing about this Luken guy, And it's funny, his email address at the time was actually that Luken guy.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
That's so him,
And,
though. It makes total sense.
Yeah, right. And so we met and immediately kind of hit it off. We have our work couldn't be more different, but personality-wise and kind of creatively, we have a very similar mindset. But our work was different enough that the discussions we had were really, I don't know, they weren't necessarily critical, but the way they made us think fired off those kind of critical thinking cells in our brain. Like every time we had a conversation about work or about our work, I think our work evolved a little bit. Mm-hmm. So slowly but surely we started hanging out more often. At a certain point we realized we shared a lot of these same stories, not necessarily glass stories, but life stories of like how either tragic incidents that changed our life course and like all these things where our lives really mirrored each other's at the same times in our life. It kind of made sense why we got along so well, because we were shaped in a similar way, personality-wise. Mm-hmm. And then at a certain point, we realized we have the same birthday.
Oh, no shit. Nice.
Yeah. And so all these things we realized, all right, we're going to be buddies.
Twinsies.
Yeah. So we ended up, he's probably one of the closest friends I've ever had, which is great, especially in the industry. And, I got to work next to him. I got to see Salt be born. If nobody knows who Luken is, he goes by Salt. Yep. He's I don't know, it's whatever. You may have heard of him.
Yeah, maybe.
He's kind of a big deal some places. Or his work has, had been, I watched this guy my buddy named Luken create this style and create salt, and it's not necessarily people weren't doing similar stuff, but I watched him take this style and way of expressing himself and develop it into just kind of an amazing body of work, an amazing kind of and watch this artist being born, right? Mm-hmm. And the beautiful part about Luken is he's just as talented business-wise as he is artistically. And so it was a great learning experience working next to him and seeing how that developed. Yeah, he's great. And so, he's been able to, he's given me a lot of opportunities, and I've tried to pass those back and forth. I brought him up to Penland a lot, and it's been a great relationship. And now I work in the studio with him and Snick and a bunch of other guys here in Austin. But
hell yeah.
Yeah, super influential on me, still has been and still is.
Yeah, same with me, man, because I remember when I first saw the what the hell is that book? Having a brain fart. That came out, the first book about the pipes. Smoked Volume 1.
Yeah.
And I saw him in there, and it was cool because, there was a questionnaire. Everybody's asked the same questions, the glass ever get you laid? What's your worst injury? That kind of shit. But his perspective on his work was so philosophical. And at that point in time in my life, I was going through the same kind of trying to find my way with my work. I was doing a lot of production stuff, just paying my bills. I was in a shitty marriage. I mean, I wasn't really happy with life, but the philosophies and stuff I was reading was really what kept me going. And when I came across his work and saw his philosophy, and that he actually had a philosophy about his work, and the whole idea of the teeth protecting him from the outside influences or the government or whatever, it was so unique that I latched onto him. Because early on in my career, Bear Claw and Jag were my two favorite artists, and they still to this day are two of my favorite artists. And and then Salt came in the picture, and I'm like, who the hell is this guy? And then all of a sudden it was his body of work just kept going and going and going. But then when I came to the point to where I realized you two guys were working together, I could see where his technical side was influenced from your technical side in a sense, but then your technical side was influenced from his technical side. It's it's a cool, this symbiotic relationship that the two of you guys had. Or still do.
He also, and then he fucked up my alias again, because so the first time we collaborated, really, I changed my alias to Peppa just to fuck with him. So then it was these are salt and pepper pieces, and then the motherfucker took that piece, got it photographed, and sent it off, and it was on a cover of, at the time, a magazine in our world. And then motherfucker, now I'm known as Pepper. I'm like, Jesus. So at a certain point, fucking this Pepper got accused of biting goat scrote style, and like I'm just like, fuck, man, I don't know what to do now.
Man.
Like, yeah.
I wonder if anybody out there has like, I have an original goat scrote. They're like, who the fuck is that,
dude? Yeah, dude, don't mess with the scrote. That was, like, oh god, yeah. I wonder if I ever even signed pieces like that. That would be hilarious if somebody was like, holy shit,
yeah,
I have a goat scrote. Yeah. Yeah. No, we've kind of bounced back and forth. It's been really cool. And then also to see him develop this, not just conceptually, but like technically. You look at kind of those sculpted pieces, that like when people call it like dirty sculpting, where it's just like real quick and heavy carves, and like you look at this and you're doing things to the material that you've been taught that don't work, right, or that aren't archival. I've watched him turn something that may be volatile into a style that is really stable. And it's funny, if you ever get to see him work compared to someone else that does stuff that's similar, you'll understand that like he's actually doing this in an extremely different way than anybody else. And that if you ever anybody out there ever gets to gets a chance to take a class from him, it'll be the best thing you've ever done. Even if you don't want to work with that style, you will learn more about the material. He has such a deep understanding of the material and can talk about it in a way that is easy to absorb, that I think he's probably one of the best teachers out there. And I've seen a lot. So
I've heard that from a lot of people.
Yeah. But I bet and then that kind of led me up to in Austin here. That kind of led me up to the whole Penland blur that has been the last 4 years of my life. I at a certain point, Luken and I both went to AGI in Pennsylvania, and Tom Donner put on this event and still does, or I don't know, he's taken a little bit of a step back, but it was this cool little gathering in the middle of nowhere, where a bunch of flame workers would get together and kind of collaborate and trade ideas. And Luken and I went up there, and I met Carmen Lozar, who has always been one of my favorite artists in general, and she's flame worker. And we hit it off, and she kind of asked me to be her teaching assistant at Penland. And I'd never been able to take a class at any of these craft schools. They're super expensive. At least at the time, we were like, oh my God, how would I ever save up that $3,000 to take a 2-week class? That's ridiculous, you know? And after I go there, I'm like, that would have been the cheapest, best thing I ever could have done for myself. Like that money and that 2 weeks would have changed my whole career. Because even, I guess, what was it, like 12, 13 years in, the first class I took there changed everything. It changed it. In 5 minutes, Carmen changed my whole perspective on my work, how I make it, what I think about, And it was her, and it was also being in such a immersive educational experience where you're in the studio 16 hours a day with your instructor, with your other students. You're eating with everybody else on campus. If anybody doesn't know, Penland is it's called Penland School of Crafts. And when you hear, I like to make clear, when you hear crafts, a lot of people think you're hot gluing macaroni onto fucking paper plates and shit. But like, this is traditional craft media, where it's like ceramics, glass, metals, small metals, jewelry making, metal smithing, printmaking, a letterpress, book making, paper making, blacksmithing, carpentry, like everything, woodworking, like everything top to bottom that people do with their hands at an expert level. This is where you go to study with masters, in an immersive environment. You can, in a 2-week class, you can get a full semester's worth of knowledge from a person that would never teach at university. You'll never get access to them. I can't recommend it highly enough. It's funny, as pipe makers, we tend to reject the people that have ignored us. You know what I mean? And I did, for sure. Where it's like, you guys don't fucking pay attention to us. Why should I give you the time of day? And I actually respect that opinion a lot, because fuck that. That was really hard for a long time, being discriminated against because of an object you make by other people that just make objects. Fuck you. But when I went there, I realized like that isn't everybody. And when you relate to somebody on a level of like, we all make stuff, that goes away, and the amount I learned from the 85-year-old weaver sitting next to me at lunch was astounding, and the fact that when I talked to her about pipes and was able to relate to her on a way of making something, a person that has never touched marijuana in her life, let alone a pipe, even tobacco pipe, but talking to her about why I make it and what I think about when I make it, is that she was totally into it, and so you put yourself in these situations that you kind of have typically rejected, and it took me 13 years to do it, and I kind of had to be drugged there and realized, like, man, it kind of sucks that our relationship with other people, because of what we make, gave me this resentment towards these traditional ways of learning that are actually fucking amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I got to assist her, and then I got to come back and teach. There's a strict no pipe policy there, and so that was always awkward to figure out, like, how to do that. And then they have this residency program that I learned about, and I said, like I had all the time I've been making this artwork sculpture on the side, and it got enough attention to get me these opportunities, and then I applied for this residency, which I'd never applied. I've heard that word before. I didn't really know what a residency was.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if
I was teaching a 2-month. Yeah.
I just want to explain that to you.
Yeah. So while I was there teaching, when I was teaching, I actually taught what's called a concentration, which is a 2-month class. And at every class, they do this open house they have resident artists at this school. And so you go down to this big old barn and you see these 7 people that have been given an opportunity to be a resident artist at Penland. And what that means, residencies in general can be any length of time, really. Typically, they're pretty short. Let's say a long residency would be 6 months, and a short one would be like a week. And they do them at schools or teaching facilities or just different places all over the world. And typically you'll go as an artist, and they'll give you some resources, and you're just exposing yourself to, say, whatever they have to offer as an institution or creative space, and that's influencing what you make. And it's a way to kind of get you into a new spot and bring in new people into their spot, and kind of further this creative collaboration. That's a very general way of explaining some residencies.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Penland's residency is very similar, except it's extra long, and it's 3 years.
Wow.
And what they do is you apply, and you're competing against a bunch of people. It's rather hard to get. And then if you get accepted, it is they give you a studio, an apartment, and meals for 3 years, and you make whatever you want. You have no obligation to the school whatsoever.
Incredible.
Except to make what you want. Now, the studio you get is empty. It's just a space, so you bring your studio, and you have to pay for your overhead still, which is your electric, your gases, and all that type of stuff. So you're still paying your studio overhead. They basically just supplement your rent and throw some food at you. But you're also kind of on this campus. So every year, every 2 weeks, 200 students come in with 15 amazing instructors for these classes, and you're right there, right? So you get access to the instructors and this crazy creative, just this energy that's around you all the time. And they're at this peak creative freaking energy level for 2 weeks. I mean, you're blowing out. Like, you leave that place just a shell. You've just given everything you can give to your expression or your medium, right? Mm. So for 2 weeks, you go crazy and you leave like can barely stand. And then fucking 200 more people come in and their energy levels at the ceiling. And that's contagious, you know?
I'm sure.
So you end up making a lot of work. It's exhausting. And while it's an amazing experience, it's fucking brutal, man. You put a lot of pressure on yourself to make work and to do things that look good towards this school, to reflect good on this opportunity they've given you. And at a certain point I received this residency and moved my life to Penland. And at a certain point realized, like, I've applied with this other body of work because, I knew that they had this no pipe policy and blah, blah, blah. You've just learned over the years to, like, keep it separated until it's the appropriate time to talk about it. As a pipe maker coming from the 90s, it's just kind of how we've developed, some of us, especially people that didn't kind of stay in the Northwest, where it was more of a outlaw subculture, pop culture, cool thing to do. If you were anywhere else that it maybe wasn't, you learned to kind of keep a dividing line, or isolate one from the other until you knew it was cool to like talk about it, right?
Yeah.
So at a certain point, I realized they may not know that I'm a pipe maker at Penland after I moved up there. At least the people that mattered, like that maybe could ask me to leave. I don't know. But all I knew was I spent every dime I had moving out there, and that now I didn't know if they're gonna ask me to leave, and I didn't know if I could. The only way I was going to actually pay the overhead and those bills and facilitate the things I wanted to make while I was there was to make pipes to sell to pay the bills. So that first 6 months at Penland was fucking scary, man. I didn't know what to do. Like I realized, there was actually I'm not going to name names, but like somebody I really respected, an older generation flameworker artist, had called the school and made it very clear that they didn't like the fact that a pipe maker was there, and that they should not have that there.
So
they happened over and over again.
They kind of called you out in the process, huh?
Well, somebody outside of that whole situation was like making a big fuss about me being there, and like that just added to my like insecurity of the whole situation. Luckily, in the long run, I figured out the people that mattered had known all along, and they had my back, right? And another with the resident artists not only was like, you don't have anything to worry about, number one, and you're being a fucking pussy. Why don't you just take this shit head on and go get it, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. He was like a great carpenter, more from the punk rock generation than the grunge generation with me, And like, so he was just like, fucking man up and do this shit, like this is your chance. And so that's when I just decided that those fucking two portfolios that I kept separate. When I gave my slideshow the first time, and I only put the artwork in there and told the story of my artwork, there are these huge holes of like, I had no stories about galleries. I had no stories about shows. I had no stories about anything. I just had this work, And so I realized after seeing other like established artists slideshows and them talk about their work that like mine was lacking in a way, because I had to leave out 80% of my story. And what happened was I realized that they wanted me there because of that work. They wanted me there because whatever happened in my life led me to make this work, and it was creative and they thought it was interesting. What was the most interesting part was the story that I had to leave out and how that work was made and got to be made. And as soon as I started to combine those two, as soon as I started to tell my pipe story with my art story, not only did the work make more sense, but I was more confident. I was able to talk to these people about pipes in a way that they totally understood. Like, and this is also the community or the people that are easiest to talk to because they make things with their hands. We share that language. So I learned the proper steps to disarm people's initial hesitation with pipes in that kind of art world, even the hotshot people.
Yeah.
It turns out most of the people that had a problem with pipes and have forever have been the hot glass people more so than any other medium. I can't tell you how many times I sat at lunch like I said, that 80-year-old weaver that was like, I saw this really great documentary on Netflix the other day, and talking about degenerate art.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I was actually, there's I'm in that movie for a second, just like a little clip, and they were like, that's amazing. It's so cool. So there was a lot less resistance to it than I thought. But what has happened is we've been in this glass world, and it's this flameworking / hot shop conflict, and then pipe making is a subculture amongst flameworking, and so there's this weird tension that has been there forever that's disappearing now. And I don't think anybody really gave a shit. And that's the other thing I learned was like, nobody really gives a shit. And if you can talk about your work intelligently and somebody doesn't like it, well, they're just a fucking asshole. It has
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with what you make. It's like, oh, I wouldn't want to hang out with those people anyway. There's assholes all over the board. It doesn't matter, it's just the people that you want to talk to in life are the people that kind of respect you and what you do.
Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't matter if it's pipe making or anything else. There's going to be people that are just dicks, right? So we took it very personally in that it was about the pipe, but really we were just talking to assholes, and maybe we didn't quite know the way to approach people to kind of give them a better, perspective on our work, and that's what I learned. And once that happened, that was in the first year of that residency. Not only was I able to talk about it more, but it also gave me a new perspective on why I make the work that I do. And then why I make the pipes that I do, and what I like about the pipes and what I like about the art. And what was most surprising about that residency was I came out of it with not only a great art portfolio and a better understanding of what I do and why I do it and what I want to make with my art side, but I also came out of it with what I love about the pipe and why, and why I'd been weirdly kind of ashamed in a weird way. And I hate using that word because that's not exactly right, but there was this weird tension
Yeah, I
with
know
that
what you mean.
object.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and then how now that I could talk about it with, like, yeah, you know what? I smoke weed. When I was 24, I smoked it like it was fucking going out of style, and that was my lifestyle. And now that I'm 40, marijuana isn't my lifestyle, but it definitely still complements my life.
Mm-hmm.
I still use it. I still love it. And it's just I don't do it in the same way. And the objects that I use to consume it reflect, that. Back then, I'm not looking for a big bubbler to get really crazy with. I'm looking for an intimate. I'm not passing it around to a group of people either. Like,
Right.
if I smoke marijuana now, it's in more of an intimate experience. It's usually just me in the studio or in a sketchbook or watching a movie, or maybe in one or two other people. And so the work that I make now in the pipe world, I think, reflects who I am more than it ever has. It's closer to fine art than it ever has been for me, and couldn't be happier as a pipe maker, because I think for the first time, for me, it's crossed over to my art.
Yeah, I agree.
Just in the way that I make it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
So anyway.
I think your work definitely has an expression to it that is a fine art. Like there's a couple guys out there that to me stand alone. Yourself, Salt, Jag, Joe Peters, Coil at times. Like there's guys that including yourself, that have really taken the technical side of the fine art of it and created it as a functional pipe, which then transcends all genres of glass blowing. Because there's still that argument out there: is glass blowing a craft or is it an art? It's like when Chihuly came out, it was always that kind of that whole stigma. It still had it was a craft. It was a craft. The bead makers at home working in their house making little beads and stuff, which I've seen some amazing bead work that I would consider to be so close to being a fine art because of the amount of detail and time and work that goes into making these fucking beads. But then you get into but what you're seeing now, it's like I go through your Instagrams and look at your portfolio in there in a sense, and it's like you can see where it started from the beginning of Penland to where you are now, and it's like it's crazy.
Well, it's also that it's like that's going from a craft school. There's that art versus craft debate is like it's one of those things that comes up all the time, and it's interesting, and then you're beating your head against the wall because you realize that definition of art is so fucking subjective, and the people's definitions of crafts, go from the design world to Hobby Lobby, right?
Yeah.
And so, people can think anything's art and anything is craft, and it's just like we all have to like sit down at the beginning of this and like establish our definitions and like a starting point, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's funny, and Luken, and this is a philosophy that I've adopted, not a philosophy, I guess, but an observation about what a craft object or an object of design can do, right? And it's so let me just say this, like the reason I love the pipe so much, and a lot of just objects that you deal with on a daily basis, is that it's the unique relationship you build with it, right? It's tactile, it's functional, um, it's you use it to consume a substance that makes you contemplate things. It makes you look at that object and pay attention to it in a way that you don't pay attention to any other object you have, basically, right? I mean, and especially being a glass object, it's like, you know, in the sculptural world or art world, you buy a sculpture and you put it on that pedestal and it doesn't come off. You don't take it down and pass it around. You build a relationship with this object. It fits in your hand, the way it fits your mouth, you know, the way that the ratio between the bowl and that you understand every little nook and cranny of this piece because you've inspected it. What a better way to deliver your ideas to than a pipe. Like, it's in their hand, they're looking at it. Like, if you have something to say and you put it in that, they're gonna fucking see it.
Yeah.
Now, and not only see it, they're gonna pass it to the next dude. And now, guess what? They're gonna put it in a fucking Pelican case, take it on a plane, and take it across the country. How many other pieces of artwork actually get to do that?
I know, bro. I agree 100%.
It's
I
crazy.
love it. Some of my favorite things that I see on Instagram when people tag me in pictures of my work is when they take my little owls out into the woods and it's on a fucking mountain with this amazing landscape in the background, or it's in the snow, you know, to put it out in the environment, but they're out there in the environment using it in this ceremonial way, like you're saying. It's such a unique expression as an artist with the medium that will fuck you up if you're not careful. You know,
Yeah.
and for us to be able to take that and manipulate it in a way where it manipulates us as well. But then we create this ceremonial object, like you're saying, that people look at and they know every little intimate nook and cranny of that piece as they own it. You know, it's such a unique opportunity as an artist to express herself in this medium. You know.
Yeah, and now it's for me. It's and this is where I would like to I mean, not necessarily challenge other artists, but I think the cool part now is it's time as we're maturing as a group of makers, as pipe makers, and people that are interacting in the pipe world, is that I think it's time for a little bit of a discourse on and a bit of like critique on like what we're doing and why we're doing it, and we have access to change things. We actually have access to put ideas onto these things to really interact with the culture. I don't know if we're necessarily doing that right now. We got a lot of high-fiving going on and not a lot of like, is this a nice object? Is this pretty? Is this you know, well designed? Is this, you know, so I mean, we're at this unique time now that we have this tension where people are looking at us. It's like, are we saying things that deserve to be taken really seriously? And I think a lot of people are, you know, I think, but as a group, we can really start to think more about not just how we're making things, but why we're making things, and the ability that this object has to translate messages. And just because we're most of us are this younger group that, you know, smokes weed, doesn't mean that we don't have interesting things to say. And that's a stereotype we've been fighting for a long time, is that this burnout pothead bullshit. And it's just like, no, this is just a substance that doctors and lawyers and everybody from burnouts to, you know, professors consume. And that now we have we have this tool to get our ideas out, and it's time we really start. I think it's time that as a group of pipe makers, we kind of really think about that and start to use that in ways maybe we haven't as a group done, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I think especially with technology, the way things have changed for us as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool. I mean, with me, I think the one thing I've learned is that, like, where I really about myself in this at the Penland thing and everything else is that I've always had this fine art stuff, these expressions that I have to get out. But as far as the pipe goes, or is my real zen in the studio when I make an object, a craft object like a pipe, was like, I love that R&D zone, right? That discovery period. And I love simple design, you know. When I look about what I would want to own as a pipe or as furniture or whatever, it's like, it's starting as I start to get older and my tastes narrow, and I realize like what I really enjoy is that I really like these kind of simple, clean, efficient, well thought out objects.
Yeah.
And that I think I'm transitioning into more of a designer than an artist, right? And and I think those are both equal. I don't think that's one or the other is a higher form of expression.
Yeah, I
I think
completely agree.
there's a difference with modern design, with design and art, is they're saying, typically they're saying kind of two different things. Art is a little bit of, hey, look at me, and design is a little bit more of, hey, look at this, right?
Yep.
And I'm much more comfortable pushing the attention away from me and towards the object. So I think that's where I realized, like, I love that design process more than the art. Is I'm self-conscious with people. I'm self-conscious taking praise. I'm self-conscious people looking at me sometimes. But I really like it when people appreciate that object I make, and for their own reasons, right? They develop that relationship with it. That's their personal relationship. It isn't necessarily, I haven't told them what to think. I've just given them the opportunity to think. I think that's very important, and it's just as valuable as a piece of art that is, has a very specific purpose, a very specific message. An object that just inspires you to think is just as important, without giving you a specific message. So I love both. I love both sides, and I respect both sides of the art world and the pipe world. I think I'm transitioning to focus more on that object of design rather than the object of expression, which they both cover, but one leans harder on one side than the other.
Hell yeah.
That's what I've learned at Penland, I think, and yeah.
That's killer. Hey, can you give me like 2 minutes, bro? I gotta take a pee real quick.
Yeah, no, actually, you know what? I'm gonna do the same thing.
Yeah, I was about to say, take a quick.
I'm just gonna leave this. I'm gonna set this down. I'll be back.
Yep, same here. All right.
All right, bye.
Yeah.
Cool. Are you?
Yep, I am.
Yeah, nice.
So, yeah, good timing. So yeah, I was like, oh shit, let me go take a pee. Coffee's still good.
Man, it's so funny. Yesterday with Luken, we just got into we'd recorded our podcast. We were recording a podcast, which kind of already done, but we were kind of re-recording it. And it got to a point where I was like, man, we've been talking for so long. I have to go to the bathroom.
Got to.
Oh, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, that's the beauty of doing this. You can always just stop and hit pause and come back to it. And on that same note, after we get done talking, I was going to give you some notes on your guys' show.
Yes, please. We were, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love that.
Hell yeah. Cool. So, yeah, man, so back on the fashion and art thing, myself personally, I'm in that same kind of transition myself. I got remarried almost, I guess, 2 years ago now, but we've been together for 4. And my wife's an elementary art teacher, and she's got an amazing sense of fashion and design to her, like just to know like how she dresses and carries herself and what have you. And she's we get Elle Decor magazine in the mail, and I never really was into reading design magazines necessarily. Like I have some like Architectural Digest and different ones in the past,
right.
But going through Elle Decor, and it really opened my mind to the idea of being a designer, of the actual concept of having seasonal fashions in a sense,
Right. Yeah.
And conceptually wise, I think as a business, it works well too, because then you can take a line. I mean, shit, you could take like, say, 4 lines that you do annually, and every year you come back to that line in that season, and you just completely change it or evolve it or make it better than it was the previous year, constantly expounding upon that concept. And that's kind of what I've gotten into. And
yeah,
and having my opportunity with Disney as well has influenced that too. But it's really opened my mind to the just to that concept of being a designer, because there's so many different trends. Like right now, one of the new trends I'm seeing in pipes and the recyclers is like the hourglass floating recycler kind of concept.
Yeah,
and I see and there's amazing work being done, but it's still a lot of people are doing it. There's a lot of everybody has their own version of it, but there's still a lot of people doing it. My goal, which I'm sure is yours as well, same with Sultan, a lot of guys, is to have your own thing you're doing that people may copy your work, which is whatever, a whole nother conversation, but you're still pushing the elements of what you want to do yourself with your work, your line, your creative side, your ideas and concepts. And I know myself, I can do recyclers. I've never done a Klein before. I want to do it just for the technical side of it, just to do it. I'm sure I could, because 17 years doing this shit, I mean, I'm sure I could just about do anything right now. But I want to do things that I can't do. I want to push myself to do things that I've never done that I don't know if I can do it or not.
Yeah.
And that's what I see with your work is you've really taken like Ham's the same way. Like I appreciate his work because of the technical side of what he does, pushing the limits, thinking outside the box. Like your disc cyclers that you're doing. It's such a cool concept. Like nobody's doing that. I mean, Ham's done some window ones he was doing, which are, completely awesome. But like when I saw Salt's perk that he's doing, it was like that made so much fucking sense. So I was like, I bet you I could do that. So I made one of my Wise Guy mini tubes. I did the same freaking thing. I didn't want to post any pictures of it on anywhere or anything. I just made it for myself because I knew that if I had to try that idea.
Well, yeah.
And
that's how and it's so funny too, is like, right? I mean, I have a pretty high threshold as far as like, I mean, that's not the right way to phrase it, but like I'm highly critical of myself and being original, right? And there's a certain amount of influence I'm willing to take and then transfer before I have to check it and be like, okay, how much of this is yours and how much are you just straight taking from someone else, And there's nothing wrong with kind of seeing something and playing with it and kind of figuring out how that fits into your work. But I think which is like, what you were just talking about. And then you go like, that's amazing, that's great, and you kind of put yourself in their shoes and like see how they came to that decision or those decisions, and then it's a matter of like, well, how do I make this into something that adds to that conversation instead of just parrots that conversation, with the material and that design. And that's very important. It's what you were just talking about, is like, you don't want to put it out there until you figure out what that means to you and why you're doing it and how you're doing it. And that's one thing that's missing in the conversation that we're having with our work right now, is there's a lot of people that are like, oh man, that's interesting. I'm going to, figure out how that works and see how it's made. And they never stop to go like, oh, I'm just repeating the same shit, except now going like, look what I did, instead of like, look what they did. How can I do this? At Penland, there was this great guy, Thor Bueno, when I was up there, taught the last class I taught at Penland, which I want to touch on too. One more thing about that, but he was talking to one of my students, to JD Mapleston, actually, about something. And he says, they were talking about that subject. And he says to JD, he's like, at a certain point, my philosophy is, it's like, it's okay to follow in my footsteps, but just don't fucking stand there. I was like, God, that's great. I don't know. That probably wasn't his, but it was the first time we'd heard it. That was a really good way to put it. And I think that's an important conversation that should be developed amongst us
I agree.
as well.
Because I can understand taking someone's idea and trying to replicate it just so you can learn that technique, but not to then say, this is my thing. Like there's a couple guys out there right now that are doing goblin faces, which is always the go-to thing, the controversy of biting, right? Or even like the teleporter. I mean, it's funny because it's always Shelbo shit. No matter who's copying what, it's always Mike Shelbo, which I appreciate his work, just immensely. But that being said, it's an interesting talk when you think about, okay, so someone takes the goblin face, they recreate it exactly the same way Shelbo makes it, the same master craftsmanship or whatever you want to call it, craftsmanship that goes into that piece. Now, it devalues it obviously because it's not an original idea. But if the craftsmanship is done exactly the same, high level of quality, why can't the person duplicating it charge just as much as Shelbo does? Now I know the answer to that, but how do you feel about that?
Well, God, I mean, why can't they?
Yeah, like what, because like some of these goblins I'm seeing that these guys are making that look really good, they're selling them for like $100.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like you can try to charge that much, and you know what? It's funny is like, it's just the value isn't in the object, and I think you know that as well, you know. And it's interesting too, because in this collecting culture and like what makes that object valuable in the first place, that's my perspective. Is the artist and the scarcity and their the road that they took to make it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's interesting is in this conversation is that what Shelbo is really good at too is promoting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is just a hypothetical. Let's just not even make it a goblin. Let's say it's the same conversation, but it's something else. Like I say, so somebody makes this object and is really well known for it and gets a high dollar for it. But now pretend that they were the third guy to do it. The first two guys just weren't good at marketing, but the guy that is known for it is the third guy,
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the problems are.
And that's my answer exactly. It's the marketing and the availability to get your work out in front of people for them to see it.
Yeah.
Whether they see it first or not, it's just a matter of fact of how you do it.
How you market, yeah. And again, like that, what I just brought up Shelbo's, as far as I know, is the guy that did the goblins,
Mm-hmm.
But he's also very good at marketing. But that's where a lot of people fall off, And oftentimes the person to get known for something isn't necessarily the person that created it,
Yep.
That's a lot of the time, which is kind of unfortunate. But yeah, it's especially in our little cutthroat renegade subculture world, you see a lot of that, man. It's just like you fucking sleep on something for a second, you lose it,
Yeah.
You gotta be careful what you put out there sometimes,
Yeah, that's why for the longest time, dude, I didn't put my shit on anywhere on the internet. For one, I didn't want people copying my shit, which is whatever. But also, I didn't want it to go overseas to China and have those fuckers, start copying it.
Right. Yeah. Right. So there's like dangers everywhere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna. I wanted to kind of elaborate on one thing about that Penland experience.
Yeah.
Was the end of it, and what I was able to accomplish with, how the institution itself looked down at pipes, not just how I myself developed my perspective on it, but the cool part about it was that being in touch with everybody and being able to have that conversation, and building that cool relationship with the school and the people that program the classes. I was able on my way out to teach another 2-month class and have a conversation and with the people that program the class and get a advanced class, number one, which is kind of hard to do because everybody thinks they're advanced. I mean, when I was a year in, I thought I was better than I am now. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So I was like, fuck, man, I'm at the expert level. Let's do this,
Yeah.
But so I teach an advanced class, number one, and then they allowed me to jury that class, which means I got to ask people to submit portfolios and then choose the people that were in that class. Again, there were a lot of people that knew about the pipe stuff for me, and a lot of people that maybe didn't know the extent. And so I did that in order to be able to pick all pipe makers for this class, number one. Well, number one, because typically they're the highest skill set out of any flame worker I'm going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And then number two was to kind of expose the rest of this school that may not be comfortable with them still, outside of me, to a broad spectrum of of the pipe community, to see kind of what that's all about, And so I was able to program a class of all really talented, young, up-and-coming pipe makers. And I tailored this class, kind of worded it ambiguously so they would know that it's a pipe making class, but that it wouldn't come out right out and say it in a Penland School of Crafts catalog.
Right.
And and I was still kind of nervous about how this is going to go, right? It could go either way. And I let the guys, when a class assembled at the school, was like, okay, guys, this is our chance. So we can we're all on the same team here. So I'm not asking you guys to not be yourselves, but just be aware that the magnifying glass is on you,
Yeah.
And this is a chance to show them, what you're all about. And this is it. You guys can tell your story. And I got to give it's a 2-month class, and every instructor gives a slideshow. Mine was that first week. And then the first day of class, we have this instructor gathering. All the instructors and the head of the school kind of get together. And the director of Penland, who's an amazing woman, who I had thought didn't know I was a pipe maker and might have a problem this whole time, right? So I was nervous about her being and in that first meeting, I told them all, like, okay, this is the class I've assembled, and this is what they all do. And as instructors, like, I just want you guys to know that, it's going to be a topic of conversation across campus, and that we treat this very seriously, and we take this very seriously. And that if you could please come in, interact with our class, and if you have a problem, that makes you uncomfortable, that's going to be a topic of conversation, please come and talk to my students about their work, see how serious they are, interact with our class. If you're uncomfortable with it, before you make it a problem. Anyway, and I gave my slideshow that first week, and the director, after that first meeting, was like, I want to come to your slideshow. I'm really interested in what you were just talking about. And so she comes to my slideshow, and I made my slideshow. About 80% of this hour-long or 45-minute slideshow was about the pipe culture and other pipe makers and kind of what's going on under people's noses in this craft subculture that at this craft school nobody really knows about. And after the slideshow, she came up to me and was like, that was awesome. She's like, I'd always known that you came from that world and that you still worked in that world and that you made pipes here, and you've been very respectful about that. And she was like, but I really had no idea the extent of the subculture. And she was like, something like, she's like, that belongs here. This is really exciting. As far as I'm concerned, you guys can make whatever you want. And so after that first week, we got the full okay to make pipes at a craft school that is typically one of the most conservative craft schools out there.
Phenomenal. And
so we did a 7-week fucking crash course in, like, let's go make pipes and collaborate and talk to everybody about it and be respectful and talk about it seriously. And I think we impressed the shit out of that whole world. And it really was a really cool experience. It was, but that also led me in to being able to, do the same thing at Pilchuck, and then most recently do the same thing at Corning, which a friend of mine in Asheville compared to the Berlin Wall of glass coming down.
Yeah, totally, dude.
Being able to make a pipe at a Corning class.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, like having the ability to go from Penland to then go to all these major freaking glass schools and places like that, and then bring the pipe into it. It's congratulations. Yeah. I mean, that's amazing, dude. Like, totally groundbreaking.
Well, it's funny. So, but I still don't, I don't discriminate against people that don't make pipes either. Mm-hmm. So I never teach a strictly pipe making class. The one at Penland, I just wanted all pipe makers in the class, but we did all kinds of stuff that wasn't pipes, And mm-hmm. So every class I teach, it's more of a skill class. I want you to leave knowing how to make what you make better. Right? I want to give you maybe some tools that you don't have to make what you love to make in a better way. That's the class I teach. And so, but what has happened in the past is, like, I have pipe makers in there and I'm not able to give them that because they can't make what they want to make in the class.
Right.
And so in the case of Corning, when they called and asked me, I said, yes, but I heard you had a no pipe policy. And they said, yes, we still have that. I said, well, I understand that completely, but, in the class I teach, that isn't going to work. I teach a design class, and people need to be able to make what they design. So until that policy changes, you just kind of have to take me off the list of potential instructors. And she said, well, let me call you back. And she called me back and said, that's great. That's fine. So again, I think what I learned mostly at Penland, and while it is kind of groundbreaking, it's kind of just the language you use. Mm-hmm. to navigate that topic,
Yeah, it makes sense.
And it's been really interesting. I think that's one of the other major lessons of, like, getting your message across is kind of learning how to deliver it. And I think that's also been what we've lacking as a culture, is, like, how to deliver the message in a way sometimes that's palatable. And that's, some people are much more, like I said, like, I'm a little bit of a pussy in that way, where I will figure out a way to navigate that, right? And some people are more like, fuck you, this is the way I do it.
Yeah.
I equated it, and this is a kind of a crude fucking comparison, but I when I was talking to Jag was my TA at Pilchuck. I was like, you're more of the guy that's, like, just spit on your hand and stick it in, but I'm more of a fucking put on some smooth jazz and get the lube out, you know.
Yeah.
like you know, it's like, so, and there's nothing wrong with either way, you know. But it's been a really interesting 4 years learning how to have that conversation, and I think it's helped open the door to now that next generation of people that are going to be much more like fundamentalist pipe maker, and I'm excited to see them get a chance to tell their story about, you know, kind of the other side of the pipe world. It's more of a full on fundamentalist pipe maker, you know.
Yeah.
And I've been a blend my whole career. I've never stepped away or just, you know, from the pipe. And you know, but I've always done the art as well. Whereas some people in our world, you know, used to talk a lot of shit about pipes until the money showed up, and now they jump in like they were cool with it all along.
Yeah.
I think as somebody that never did that and always existed in both worlds without talking shit about either one, I think I have a perspective that it rubs me the wrong way more than anybody else.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I know I'm not going to say, but no, yeah. Yep.
We're not naming names or anything, but, you know, I think everybody understands that with the money comes, you know. But here's the deal. It's like, there's nothing wrong with that.
No,
and that's the other thing I've realized.
I agree.
Is like, everybody changes, and the scene has changed, and the object has changed, and the culture has changed, and why can't people's fucking opinions of it change, you know?
Yeah, I think when the person from the other
it.
spectrum comes in, it creates some kind of credibility for the industry in a sense, you know, which is a positive thing.
Yeah.
Even though they may have talked shit about the credibility of our industry at one point in time, and then by them coming into our industry creates credibility. It is what it is, but still.
Yeah.
You know.
No, I totally get it. I understand. And the interesting part too is this is just the beginning, right? And we're looking at it from a perspective of like other glass artists coming into the industry, flame workers coming into the industry that may have not been cool with it, you know, for most of the time. But the real big picture is that with the changing political dynamic, it's just like what happens when everybody else comes in, you know, when actual design world comes in, actual, you know, manufacturing. Like this is just the beginning. And if you think it's just other artists from the glass industry that are going to cross over, that's a interesting topic of conversation. Wait for the next 5 years when, you know, if everything fully legalizes, it's like when GE comes in and engineers a better way to smoke weed, and we're all out of a job.
Yeah, exactly. But you know,
it's all changing.
But it's exciting at the same time because of that.
Yeah.
Like I love Tesla and what the company in general has done for electricity and for the automobile. But the fact that they've then open sourced all their shit so that anybody who wants to fucking know how they did it has the opportunity to do it. Where our industry is very similar now, where before when we started, it was like Chinese, nobody wanted to tell you anything, you know, secret, like we're still in fucking Venice or something like that. Where now it's like open source. You know, you have Dustin Revere doing his YouTube videos, all these other guys that are doing videos. I have the podcast now. You guys got your podcast started. There's a lot of more talk about it. But what my concern is, which is what I'm trying to get myself involved in mostly with this show, is that when the laws change, our laws have to change for this industry, because the cannabis industry, the farmers and growers and the dispensaries and those guys, they have representation, whether it's people in the government that are you know, out there talking and shit, you know, what have you. We have no representation right now. I mean, there's literally nobody in our industry that is out there speaking of a voice that, okay, Colorado changes their laws for cannabis, but how are they going to change the laws for pipes? And I brought Luke Zimmerman on the show a couple times. We've been talking about it, and he is one of the. He's actually there's a cannabis bar up in Oregon now where lawyers are part of a cannabis bar where they're all learning the ins and outs of the legalities of the cannabis industry on a state level, and it's so fucked up because there's so much gray area out there right now for everybody that nobody knows who's doing what, when, where, and why. But once we get the representation for our culture in their culture, and we're working side by side. Like Luke referred to it as like we're like the kid in the back seat, we're along for the ride, where we need to be up in the passenger side saying, hey, we need to go off this exit right here. Yeah. You know, type of thing. So part of what my goal is to get myself out there, and it's kind of scary for myself because I've got kids and family and shit to do it, but I feel someone has to do it. Hence why I started this podcast. Someone had to reach out to these people who are blowing glass in their bedroom to say, you guys got to stop doing this shit. You're going to kill yourself, burn down your house, and maybe kill your family in the process.
Right. Yeah.
type of thing. And then also with degenerate art coming out and all these newbies starting them, whatever else influenced me to get this going. But now that
Yeah.
laws are changing, there has to be also now that perspective on what are we going to do. And then, like you're saying, corporations start stepping in. I mean, fuck, I saw in Florida here as we were trying to get our medical stuff, freaking Costco and Walmart and all these other places were already lined up to start selling grow accessories and kits and all this other crazy shit.
Yeah.
It's like, fuck.
Oh yeah.
Like I heard our fucking Dollar General store down the street we have here in my local town is selling pipes. They're made out of China, but they're selling little glass pipes in the fucking dollar store now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And we're not even anything legal. I mean, we're still 10 years down the road. I mean, I think this year we're going to have medical, but it's an interesting dichotomy when you think about the way everything's evolved, and it's all evolving in a good way. But there's still some gray area that needs to definitely be. looked at,
It's the thing is it's just like the rate of growth. We're definitely going through some growing pains. We're getting some stretch marks because we're like, oh shit, we're And that's the thing is I'm really happy that there are people that have a little bit more vision of like what needs to be looked forward. Right now, there's so much kind of money and momentum in this industry. It's really hard to not look past what's right in front of your face,
Yeah.
and to kind of look about what's down the road. And it's really refreshing to know that people are looking at that. That you're looking at that, and more people are as well. But like our industry, yeah, that's good. It's always been a gray area, and it's getting less and less gray. But we definitely need to have a voice. So
yeah, like, are you aware that if you sell a pipe to somebody in a legal state, they had to be 21 to buy it?
Yeah, no, didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's
no,
great.
fuck that. So yeah, so you can sell someone a pipe in Colorado, they have to be 21. But if you sell it to somebody in Ohio, they have to be 18 because it's for tobacco.
That's funny.
Isn't that stupid? But if you're in
it's funny. Well, it's so
yeah.
funny because so in Washington, like when I was like 19, I got caught with a pipe, and if I was 21, it was just a $200 fine. But because I was 19, I had to go to jail for a couple days and pay a fine and lose my license. And I was like, wait, what? That doesn't make any sense, It was like, and that was back in the 90s, and it's weird that that makes sense that there's a bunch of weird bullshit that nobody fucking understands and knows about. And that's just the way it always was. But yeah,
it's weird, man, because like that's what Luke and I were talking about. Like, if you sell, part of the thing is like we're saying, okay, if you're a company, say in Colorado, and you manufacture pipes for consumption of cannabis, you can say that now legally, but you have to also have a description on how the piece is used, why it's used for what it's used for, because it's going to get to a point to where we are going to be held liably responsible, potentially being sued in civil court if someone uses our product and is injured by it.
right.
Like McDonald's coffee. The lady burned her freaking crotch on their 1,000-degree coffee and made millions of dollars on it.
Oh yeah.
The culture for us is the same way. So we all got to start thinking about this sense of not only are we artists, but we have to really be conscious about the whole business liability side for what it is that we do. Because as these laws change, again, we're going to have to describe exactly how you use this thing. But if you're selling it and making it for cannabis in Colorado, you cannot sell that same pipe outside of the state, because then it becomes a federal issue.
Right.
It's like it's weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Nah, no kidding.
Yeah.
That's it. It is. Yeah.
It sucks, but it is what it is. And I like to bring this shit up because it's just, to me, it's so important, because living in Florida, I have dealt with this horse shit my entire career, 17 years now. And even before I even, had my first pipe, I was still using, but way before that, and had the appreciation for it, So even still, I'm still paranoid working in my studio. It sucks.
Well, I mean, just Florida in general has just always been a tornado of bullshit with the paraphernalia, So
yeah, exactly.
Just, more so than anywhere else I've lived, for sure. But
yeah. Well, kind of to move forward a little bit. I noticed which is something I appreciate with your work, is that you use a lot of clear. You don't use a whole lot of color. I'm the same way. I prefer clear myself with color accents. Do you do that because of the technical aspect to really show what goes into your work in a sense?
Yeah, I would. It's funny how that developed, right? Is like, if you look at my very early stuff, it was all like, wig wags and just kind of everything you've seen out there. At a certain point, I started trying to get the shapes to work on my shaping more. Right? I think it was but I realized that I spent so much time patterning that by the time I went to shape it, I lost the balls to do those risky moves just because I might fuck up that pattern. And so what I started doing was that prototyping out of clear, just to get the shapes down so that when I did add the color, like I could make those moves and I would be confident. And so what ended up happening was I made these clear prototypes, and a guy that worked at one of the local shops in Austin came in and saw them and was like, "Oh, let me go sell that." I was like, "Oh, it's just a prototype." And he was like, "No, I can sell that." And I was like, "Oh, well, if you think so, go ahead and take it." He comes back and was like, "Here, I got this much money for it." And I was like, "Fuck, dude, I thought that's what I was going to charge for the colored worked ones, you know?"
Yeah.
And so I was like, I had another next step of that prototype. And he was like, "Let me take that one." And he kept doing that. And next thing I know, I was like, I kind of stopped using color. But also people were like, didn't really know how complex it was what I was doing with these things. I mean, it was like, just because they were clear, they were still made up of like 30 pieces.
Right.
But you couldn't tell because the clear blended. And so actually the funny thing is why I started adding just the black lip wraps was just to differentiate the pieces so that people would know how many pieces there were to put in there.
Interesting.
So yeah, and then I started really getting better at these lip wraps. OG Lippy crew here, so and then I started stacking them up, 2 or 3 at a time, and started to realize that's a really beautiful design element, and started using that as my color, and not necessarily to differentiate between the pieces, but now as a design element.
Interesting.
And it also mirrored what I learned at Penland, and that what I liked about like that simple, clean aesthetic, and then it put more emphasis on the shape than the pattern. And I think that was a really important thing for me, is kind of introducing that conversation to people too, hopefully, is that, just because it's not all color and fully worked, it's still an incredibly complex piece that has more to do with the design than, the more to do with why I made it than how I made it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think clear out of everything shows your flaws. So
yeah, well, that's the other thing too. Is like it's amazing what you can hide
Yep.
with color.
Yep.
And that I didn't understand how shitty my seals were until I started working with all clear.
Exactly.
And they were still pretty good, but they weren't as clean as I thought they were. That's
Right.
for sure. Just because they were smooth on that surface, and I really thought I worked them in really good. There was still a lot of optic ripple, which is acceptable stability-wise, but as far as I wanted everything to flow together, like to redistribute that ripple, was a real cool thing to learn, how to really blend clear glass.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Can you hear my puppy in the background?
yeah.
Is she loud?
She is pretty loud, yeah.
Hold on 1 second. She's annoying as shit. Because she'll start doing this, and then Oakley, my other dog, he's a husky Aussie mix, and he starts howling, and then she starts howling, and next thing I know, they're like singing to each other. But it's like it's so loud. It's like I sit here and I'll just like laugh listening to these fucking dogs. It's hilarious. But
That's awesome.
it's
That's
just like
hilarious.
this is a common thing amongst my interviews. I'm like, hey, hold on 1 second, my dogs are being noisy. Usually I don't mind it, but when she gets too loud, it's like it's over. It's too loud. So 1 sec, I'll be right back.
No problem.
All right, I'm back.
All right.
Always makes for fun radio. The beauty of editing.
Yeah, right.
Oh yeah, yeah, man. It's funny on that note with the how much stuff color hides. I've seen a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but I guess that's for lack of a better term, artists whose work I respect, and then I see it in person, and it's like, okay, this isn't as clean or as technical as I thought. But then I see your work, and it's like more technical than I thought.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, holy shit! How the fuck did he do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it's funny. So I'm a huge fan of stand-up comedy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I use this parallel a lot because of, I think that is a craft as much as anything.
Yeah.
And it's just how funny how hard it is for them to refine make these sets and routines or just jokes and how they flow together, and how they have to craft it in a way that sounds fluid. And you watch someone the easiest, most pop culture example is like a Louis C.K. When you watch him, a special of his, and you're like, man, it's just telling a story. It's so natural, and it's just like, god damn it, that's fucking so hard,
Mm-hmm.
And like it just looks so easy and natural, and that's why you like him, because he's just good at it. It's like, fuck no, dude, it took decades to do that,
Yep.
to say something that simply. And when you listen to good stand-ups, really well crafted stand-up comedians talk about the craft of their medium, and they have this saying called playing to the back of the room, right, where you're on stage at a little shitty comedy club, and there's the audience, and then there's the bar in the back of the room, and who's standing around that bar are the other comedians. And if you can make them laugh, fuck the audience. Like, they might not be laughing, but if those guys around the bar are laughing, like, you're on the right track.
Yeah,
right?
hell yeah.
And that at some point, the rest of the audience will catch up, and they'll laugh too. And that was also something that, when, like I said, back in my Miami days, working with that glass artist at the university, the professor, is that he had this body of work that was super successful, right? And he was adamant about changing his work. He never just made the same thing over and over again. He always would move on. And at a certain point, the work we were making wasn't necessarily as successful as that earlier work. But I asked him, I was like, why don't you just go back and make a couple of those pieces, or in a different way or something, because people still want them, And he kind of looked at me, like, he says, you know what? Sometimes you got to have the balls to do what is right, and let everybody else fucking catch up. And I think that's starting to happen with my work, and a lot of it is because people like you realize, like, some of these things that look pretty simple are actually really fucking mind-bending and hard, even to glass blowers,
Yeah.
But once you'll figure it out how I did it, and be like, oh, I see that,
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
hopefully it'll inspire you in a way to do something similar, in a different way.
Yeah, well, like when you talk about this, the classes, I'm self-taught myself. Like I had a real basic apprenticeship when I started. I met a guy at the Renaissance Festival, and I did like 6 months of shopkeep, sweeping floors and what have you, and then I did 6 months of torch work, and it was all beads and pendants. But I got a really strong technical foundation on shop setup and safety and the equipment itself. Like, I was always taught that your torch should be just as easy to use as a screwdriver when you understand the properties of how it works.
Right.
Kind of idea. And but I took my first class last year, and it was with Coyle and Steve Sizlove. And
Nice.
And with those two guys together, it was the first time they actually had worked together in person. I guess they'd done mail collabs and stuff. But they started off the class with, what do you guys want to learn? And I was like 10 minutes late to the class. I drove like 6 hours to get to there.
Right.
And so I missed like giving an input what I wanted to learn, but everybody that mentioned something was something I wanted. But these two guys sat there, and they went over our shit, and they were fully communicated between all of us. It was more of a visual class. It wasn't actually hands-on.
Yeah.
But the amount of confidence it gave me in my work I was already doing was huge. But also the amount of stuff that I learned, just how to fine tune, or just seeing like a move that they would do that I thought was way complicated, was something that I was already doing, but I hadn't implemented it necessarily that way yet.
Right.
And that really changed everything for me. Like, I came home and it was like, I had to like throw all my shit away and start over, kind of thing. It cleaned it all up, tremendously.
Yeah.
And it was neat. And then, but then I started really paying attention to art, that type of artist, like yourself. And then I came across your bottle with the gecko or the chameleon skeleton inside of that.
Yeah.
How the fuck did you guys do that? Was that a lathe piece?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and still, like, none of us had ever done that before, and there was like a communication problem too.
Yeah, totally. I get that. Yeah.
That was hilarious. So much fun with those guys, like that, and that was one of my favorite pieces, and it actually just sold, which I was bummed about, because I was about to pay those guys out and keep it. I was really like a week away from making that move of going like, I made a little bit of money. I think I can talk them into letting me have this. But anyway, but yeah, and a lot of it's just like throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks,
Mm-hmm.
and and it's great what the language of glass goes a lot further than, you know, a spoken language sometimes, where it was like them just pointing, and, you know, they spoke pretty good English too, but when it comes down to when shit hits the fan, you know, we're all missing some skills of communication, but the glass skills and just being able to, like, you know, and get things going. That was a cool piece.
Yeah,
it's
it
huge
was.
too.
Oh, really? How big was it?
110 millimeters in diameter.
Holy
that
shit.
tubing is 110 millimeter, and it stood probably about 20 inches tall.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Actually, I got
gives
a
me-
ruler right here.
That makes it even more because when you look at the picture of it, it's like the photography that was done was so well done on that, you know, by the way. So it's always hard to gauge size when you see pictures.
Yeah, actually, that may have been like more like 26 inches tall. Yeah, it's huge. It was cool piece though. Love that. Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
But
Amazing.
yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's where, like, your technical side for me is, like, really when I started. Like, I've always enjoyed your work. Like, for instance, like your caterpillars you were doing. What the hell influenced that?
Oh, that was working for this woman in Miami, that the other the ceramics professor, you know, and that it's a whole part of that story I left out, but that was another real good window into the fine art world, was that she was making this work and she needed some little glass parts that I helped her make. They're very simple little glass pomegranate seeds. And then eventually she got an opportunity to work with a bigger gallery and make work a little crazier. So I started making more elaborate stuff for her. And eventually her work looked like kind of bone and muscle and plant life. And her name was Bonnie Seaman. So she asked for some insects, and so I started making these little insects and different insects, and I was making spiders for her, and figured out a way to kind of make the what would you call it, the thorax, or the big booty on like a black widow, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like how to make this interesting pattern. And in that pattern I was making, I realized it looked just like a segmented caterpillar before I melted it in. And then, boom, next thing I know, I was making these caterpillars. They're probably still the coolest things I make. But they're fucking explosive. You know, that's one of those things where they're just a bunch of really bad seals stacked on top of, compounding on each other, to the point where it's a beautiful object, but not necessarily well made as far as what borosilicate can handle, you know, stability-wise.
Yeah,
but there's certain
fun.
sacrifices you make to make something cool sometimes, you know?
Yeah, I know what you mean, man. Because, like, at Disney, I'd make Olaf, the snowman from Frozen.
Yeah.
And it's an awesome opportunity. I'm the only one in the world making them, you know, which is fucking super cool. But I do them I use Chinese white to make them with.
Yeah.
And it took me probably, I would say probably about 2 weeks of just playing with that glass to just figure out that glass, you know, and then then to have to sculpt it and then add it and beat the shit out of it, and then be able to put it into production to where, like, I need to make like maybe like 1.5 an hour in a sense to make it worth my time, you know. But it's fun to take borosilicate and push it as far as you can push it to where the shit just doesn't want to work anymore.
Yeah.
And then you push it a little bit further. You know?
Yep. Yeah, they learn so much that way.
Yeah, totally, man. Because like the caterpillars you're doing, I mean, they're freaking awesome. If you don't mind, how much were you selling those for? The retail on those?
It's so funny because they started out as $50 retail, you know, and now they're up to like almost 400, you know.
Yeah.
And that's still not even giving me the money relative to the time I put in them. That's why I typically only make them. Like, and just I make a batch, and most of them are for gifts, you know, like I'll give them away. I'm actually happier giving them away to people that I'm close to, than selling them, because it's such a shitty equation of, like, those are a passion project where I think they're cool as shit. But it's like, you know, it's really hard to get the money I need for them. They take so long, the way I like to make them.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
And the pain in the ass factor is a motherfucker, dude. Yeah, just getting those legs on there is ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, man, seeing oh man, just like some of the details out there that are being created in bugs and stuff, it's mind blowing.
Yeah.
And mind bending.
That's for sure.
I don't get it. So yeah, man. So before I take up too much of your time, let's go ahead and take a minute to thank our sponsors, and then we'll get back, and it'll be time for us to crash the kiln.
Sounds good.
All right, man.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/wiseguy radio. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. That's at www.audibletrial.com, AUDIBLETRIAL.com/wiseguy radio.
Kiln round consists of around 6 questions, and if you can give me a 30 to 6 second answer, and if you want to expound upon them as well, you can too, which typically happens. And the first question I always like to ask is if you could work with any living glass artist that you haven't worked with yet, who is it and why?
Oh crap. I guess shit. Man, that's a rough one. Any living glass artist and why? How about? Man, I gotta narrow that down. I'm just gonna go with the easy one, because it's always been true. But banjo.
Hell yeah.
And I think why is because we share a similar engineering mind, and that I've always just appreciated his just the balls he has to make these large projects, right? And it's something you don't in mind investing a shit ton of time. And at any moment come crashing down. And that's what I've done with kind of some sewing machines and stuff in the past. So like those big projects. And I think the problem is I think that we would probably start a project that was way too big because neither of us are scared of it,
Yeah. Like his R2 that he first had, that big R2 he made. I was like,
yeah.
How big is that thing? I mean, really? What the fuck? Holy Jesus.
No, it would be a shitty game of chicken where neither of us were like, oh, yeah, well, we could do that too. Oh, yeah, well, we could do that too. And next thing you know, it'd be like, oh, Christ, we got to do this thing.
Yeah, you guys are calling Marcel like, hey, guys, I need a kiln to put this thing in. What are your top 5 favorite colors in glass?
Let's see. Cymax clear. Let's see. Borautistic clear. How many different types of clear are there? No.
Hey, clear's a color.
Actually, the clear is my favorite color. So, I mean, I think that clear, number one, you get to play with a fucking force field. How cool is that? It's the coolest thing that nobody pays attention to.
Oh, yeah.
Playing with fucking nothing. It's so awesome. It's the one thing in glass that's so unique to glass.
Especially when you're in the sun.
Yeah. So there's clear. There's my favorite color combo ever was the first one I did in the 99, not first one, but first one I fell in love with, which was Turbo Cobalt over OG Moss, man. And it's just not around anymore. But so, and then let's see, that's 3, and then a black, jet black, love it. And let's see, what other color is there?
All right.
That's the problem with a guy that doesn't use a lot of color, is that you hit the wall. Easy, North Star Yellow, NS09.
Yeah, I love that color.
That's actually my top is North Star Yellow.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
So what's your worst injury in the studio?
This may take a little more than a minute to tell.
Hey, that's fine.
But you're gonna love it. I'll make it quick. So I just got my GTT in like 2001, 2002. I got a Delta, and I had that cool needle flame that you can get on a brand new GTT that is just fucking amazing. And somehow I dropped something and reached for it and put my finger right through that just needle sharp flame, smallest flame. But what it did is it kind of, on my pointer finger, it went from kind of the side of one fingernail, barely hit the fingernail, and then kind of wrapped around down the whole finger, but kind of wrapped around the whole thing, like this is like you drew a kind of a spiral from one side of your fingernail on the outside, and it spiraled all the way to the kind of webbing in between your first and second finger, right? So I drew this line with this torch. And then what had happened is my mother is a nurse. I called her, I was like, this was a bad one. I rarely call my mom for medical advice, but this one I was like, okay, I don't know. Should I be going to the hospital? What's going on? She was like, well, here's the deal. It was a day or two later. It started to blister. She was like, just, keep it clean and let that blister go for as long as possible. That blister is just, it's healing. It's what the body does. Try not to pop it and let the body do its thing. What you don't want to do is get infected, and all this stuff. So she's like, let the blister go for as long as possible. Keep me updated and see. So what happened is this blister developed that was just enormous. It's probably as tall as my finger, but it was like a banana slug wrapping around my finger, right?
Cool.
And so I had splinted this thing. It was on my right hand. I splinted it with a, so it wouldn't bend. It couldn't bend anyway. And then just wrapped it and kept it that way for a couple weeks. And this thing was just building and building and building pressure. And eventually it's just been wrapped for so long. I'm in Florida. It's humid as shit. It's just my finger is just, it's like I've been swimming for 2 weeks straight. It's just, wrinkled and just like this thing needs some air, right? And so I unwrap it and giving it air. It feels great. And it's not hurting anymore. The blister is just like, just like a water balloon. And so I'm driving around town running some errands. I go to the bank and make a deposit. I hand her my check and the deposit slip. And she looks at me, she's just like, oh, shoot, here, you forgot to endorse your check. So she slides back the check to me, hands me a pen. Without thinking, I grab the pen and squeeze. And this blister lets go, and it shoots this amazing, like, arcing money shot of blister juice, like, straight at her, and then hits her. There's a trail leading from my finger to her, to up her shirt, over her shoulder, and to the wall behind her.
Oh, my God.
Now, the beautiful part is she is doing that thing where at the bank where they, she has like quit looking at me and she's now looking at the computer and typing in all the information. She hasn't seen any of this. And so I slide her my check, and on the way back, I drag my arm and wipe that trail of fucking blister juice back to me. And I'm just sit there waiting, And she hands me all my information, and I fucking get out of there because I'm pretty sure I just assaulted this woman. Like, and then that was it. That's my worst injury. Yeah.
Oh, God, that's so fucking gross.
Oh, it's horrible. Like, it is just, it's like the grossest story and probably one of the best ones I got as far as injuries
that's
go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's amazing though, dude, because I've hit my hand in the flame twice in 17 years, and both times hurt like a motherfucker. And like you're saying, the blister you get is incredible. How gross it is. I mean, like it's, but it's what's amazing with the burns we get from the glass is it's such an intense, amazingly quick heat, but the core of that burn, it's so deep, Yeah. It's and what I've found is, which anybody listening to this should take, is that when you do burn yourself, you should try to cool it down as quick as you can because the core is still hot. You might cool the surface down, but internally your skin's still burning.
Yeah.
Because I had an issue where I did they say lavender is like one of the good things for a burn because it takes away the pain and shit naturally, but you got to have a completely cool everything because otherwise it turns into like a fucking grease fire. And I put lavender on a fresh heat, dude. I do not recommend it to anybody. I still have a scar from it. Yeah.
Yeah. Ugh. Never thought of that. Oh God. Yeah. Ugh. Yeah. No.
Yep. All right. So on with that. Awesome. So in the studio, do you watch TV, listen to the radio, or do you do both?
I'm a freaking audiobook addict. If I'm not, listening to 8 hours of podcasts in a row, I'm audiobooks. I'll go through like 3 audiobooks a week. So that's it, man. It's just constant information if I can get it. A lot of times, even the podcasts aren't that super nerdy. A lot of them are just entertaining, just to keep my mind occupied. But I'm a big, I love science. I love anything. I love to learn while I'm working because I work so much, doesn't give me a lot of time to read and research as much as I'd like. So anything I can get while I'm working is good to me.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Do you have any favorite podcasts besides mine?
Yeah.
And yours?
Yeah, right. So yeah, my love for podcasts is like, and now I'm kind of trying to do one as well. So let's see. Hardcore History, amazing.
I've heard that. I haven't listened to it yet.
Yeah, you'll love it. Start with the Wrath of the Khans, and you'll be hooked.
That's
and it's like a 6 parts or 5 parts. Anyway, and then another history one, which is on the comedic end, which I think is great, is The Dollop.
Okay.
And you'll love that too. And that's about an hour or 2 or a half hour. But the Hardcore History goes up to 3 hours. They're more like audiobooks. You'll love it.
Nice. Have you gotten into Serial or any of those yet?
Yeah, and Serial, I'm a kind of a fundamentalist podcast guy. I'm not as much interested in just a radio show that now decides that they're a podcast,
Yeah, I'm in the same
which
boat.
is what I feel that Serial is. It's like you're just way overproduced, and which is nothing wrong with that. They're still really amazing.
Mhm.
As far as podcasts go, I'm much more the kind of guy that just wants just a pretty open-ended, long-form interviews or it's like the cool part about podcasts is I feel like is it's not broadcasting, it's narrowcasting where
Correct.
you can tap into something that you're specifically interested in, and it's not just meant for the masses. You can tap into that one dude in Sheboygan, Wisconsin that happens to be nerdy about the same thing you are, and maybe there's only 500 followers, but you can get some cool interaction like that. I love that shit. So
Yeah, that's why I thought it was cool when I started this myself before you guys got into the landscape, that I was like the only like live podcast right now that was in this space of glass blowing.
I was so embarrassed that as many podcasts as I listened to, I hadn't figured out you were doing this yet. Because like as soon as I did, I was like, damn it, which is great because now I binge podcasts, so I have so much to catch up on. It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, you're gonna be 86, so
Sweet.
yeah, which is fucking crazy. 86 episodes. Like I sat back the other day and I was thinking like, I mean, literally, bro, I was spending 30 hours a week on the show doing 3 episodes a week. And it took away, I mean, financial. But thank God my wife was helping pay the bills because, like, my savings got down. I mean, everything because I had just opened up a studio, and I wasn't getting paid for it. And that, Mountain Glass is on now as a sponsor, which is killer.
Great.
Which
Yeah,
helps.
that's awesome.
But it's because I do love this format, and it's to be a part of it, and also because I love our industry and to have the ability to help. I didn't care that I wasn't making any money, that I was that I was dedicating 30 hours, that I was up on the couch at 3 a.m, waking up with my headphones on my head because I was falling asleep during my post-production, after doing a whole day in the studio.
It is not easy, right?
No.
Yeah. Well, I want to give also, just because Mountain Glass is one of your sponsors, I'll give them a little freebie because like they were my go-to guys in North Carolina. Like they lived within an hour drive from me. And I've never dealt with a better company. It's awesome.
Yeah,
I
they're
love
fantastic.
those guys. Yeah.
Yeah, knowledgeable, the whole 9 yards, like just incredible.
Oh, the customer service is out of this fucking world, and that's the big difference between everybody else I've dealt with.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And without naming names, but my new favorite thing they're doing, man, is when you order from them, they get the little cards and they come with it with a little drawing on there that says who packed your stuff for you.
Oh,
so
everybody that works there is awesome. They're such good guys.
Yeah,
like
it's killer.
Even the packing and shipping guys are just like friendliest. I loved going there. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, it's awesome. One more thing. Have you listened to Tim Ferriss?
Yes. Love it.
Cool. I figured as much.
Yep.
Awesome. So let me see where we at now. Yeah, so I guess we kind of gone through them. Oh, yeah. If you could describe the sound of glass cracking in one word, what is it?
Shit.
There you go.
That was it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, man. So my last and final question. If you were stranded on an island, and this could be any island that you want it to be, whether it's a resort, deserted, what have you, and they had a glass studio that you had to work in, and they supplied your gases, a kiln, and your torch, what 5 items would you bring?
So your gases, your kiln, and your torch.
Mm-hmm.
Glass.
Mm-hmm.
Clear. And glasses.
There you go.
And a reamer. That's it.
That's all you need? You got 2 more?
No, I mean, so I don't work with a lot of tools. If you ever take a class from me, you'll notice it's like I use glass as a tool most of the time. So
Yeah,
I
same here.
typically use a reamer as far as and that's about it. Tweezers. I'll bring tweezers too.
Okay.
Just cause.
Yeah. There you go. Sweet. You're the first person that's only needed 4 things. And also one of the few that have mentioned glasses.
Nice.
Yeah.
I did cheat, dude. I've listened to your shit before.
Good.
You're like, oh, what about glasses? I'm like, okay, if I'm ever on this, I know I'm going to, like, don't forget the glasses.
Good.
Yeah.
You're paying attention.
I'm not that smart, dude. I had to do some research.
Awesome, dude. So before we let you go, if you want to give us some parting piece of advice to the glass artists out there listening to this and those also that are not glass artists. And then after that, if you want to give us a way where we can find you out there in cyberspace.
Yeah. I guess my piece of advice to glass artists is don't be afraid to turn them down the money and invest in yourself. Take those opportunities that, like I did in Miami, to work for other artists and learn just because you aren't getting paid for it doesn't mean you aren't making progress. So no lateral moves. As long as it's a move forward and you're learning stuff, don't worry about the money. Take those sacrifices and gather that knowledge. Let's see. My Instagram is Micah Glass. I'm about to ditch Facebook. Really, I'm done with that shit. So
Yeah, me
don't
too.
even bother. Yeah, Micah Glass. I think you can find me on. I'm just starting to up on Snapchat. Just search my name, I'll come up. And then the studio I'm involved with now. If you don't mind me promoting
go for it.
doing a shameless promo on we're starting a little podcast as well, and which is cool is that I believe it's funny that we're not. I don't think we were in competition. It's like we're kind of doing different things, which is really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't be more excited because of the podcast addict I am to try that out. But it's called Torch Time. We're just getting off the ground, and we have our shit way less put together than you do. So if you do listen, just be patient. We're going to be going through some growing pains, but please give us a listen. We'd love any input. And thank you so much. We got to have you once we get going, and we can do you a service. So we'd love to have you on our podcast.
Yeah, man, it'd be an honor.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Well, maybe we're going to try to. We talked about this. Maybe get you down to Austin and get some work done and have some fun and get you on the podcast that way. It would be great.
Man, if I can come play with you all, dude, I'd have a boner the entire time.
That would be great, man.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
I have to get a Kevlar wrap just for that, so I don't burn myself.
Awesome.
Also, hey, real quick, while we got you, I'm talking about your podcast. What's your guys' mission? Like, what's the goal perspective of what you guys want to do?
So it's funny. We are just kind of giving so it's Salt, Luken, and I, who we have these great conversations between us, and we're kind of he and David Daly of Grav Labs kind of started this without me, and not knowing that not without me, but not knowing of how into podcasting I was, and I think their philosophy was just kind of giving a perspective to people that may not be in the industry of kind of what's going on, and then I myself am much more interested in kind of the story, and so in fact these guys actually have a more clear idea of what they're going for, and it's going to be interesting to see if that aligns with what I love as well. Right now I'm excited to be involved in something I've always loved, but I think our philosophy is to kind of give a little bit of what you do, a little bit of history to the artists and makers, and a little bit of perspective to the collectors and non-collectors, and to what is going on, kind of the state of the industry as it progresses, and I'm sure our podcast will evolve into its own thing, a clearer philosophy as we figure out what our strengths as interviewers are. I think a lot of it is like you go into these things thinking like, oh, I love these things, let's do that, and then you realize, like, just like glass, you're like, oh, I can't wait to try that, and then you try it and you're like, holy shit, this is really hard.
Yeah. And
this is a whole skill set, and we have to learn a lot. So there's gonna be a lot of learning and a lot of growing pains, just like in glass blowing, as we learn kind of how to navigate this podcast as we go.
Yeah, hell yeah. Yeah, well, here I want to give you guys, like I said, got some pointers for you.
Yeah, please. We'd love any input. Thank you so much.
For sure. Hell yeah, man. Well, again, it's been an honor to have you on, and definitely y'all go check him out. MicahEvans.com as well. You can find his website. And
yes.
Other than that, brother, thank you so much for coming on board, and I hope you all enjoy this conversation. And definitely, if you can get yourself involved in education outside of your studio, whoever it's from, I shouldn't say whoever because it makes a difference who you learn from, but definitely take some classes.
Yes.
Because you don't know everything.
Definitely.
So.
Yeah. Amen, brother. Thank you again. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
Hell yeah, man. We all enjoy the show. We'll talk to you in a bit. Peace. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Wise Guy Radio Show. If you have any questions, comments, or remarks, please leave them in the show notes page area where it says comments. We'll see you soon. Have a wise night.